being at that time, a growing boy, captured, broken, and languishing under my satanic aunt and her Masonic warlock. I was in their care. They had engineered it so, and got me in their care while we were in a place called Lake City in Abaco, Bahamas. So that's where I got to be in the early 60s. And I began to hear of and actually see the dreaded Haitians. Why the dread of them is because at the first sighting of the Haitians, the whispers started in the community. From the first one seen, the whispers started until it covered the whole community. That, the exact spot or place where I lived, called Lake City, probably at that precise time in the early 60s, might have had, several hundred, not even that many, I suppose, people at that time. But in combination with other villages and local communities, this word was spreading of the arrival of the Haitians, and it was carried about, the noise or the information, the knowledge of these Haitians was carried about, and with the attendant feeling of dread. Anyone who told the story or who told of the coming of the Haitians betrayed that feeling of fear. There's a lot of fear. So as a young boy at the time, barely 7 or so years growing, and being a really sensitive boy, I felt the feeling that was going around, how these grown-ups were afraid when they heard that the Haitians were here. And the message coming along with it, or the word coming along with it, was that these Haitians were voodoo workers, and a description of what sort of things they did was coming to the public view or understanding, and it permeate in the thinking of all. And myself being a young boy and other young boys and girls of the community with me, there was a very serious dread in the community about the Haitians. There would talk about zombification and sacrificial, what they call selling one to go and work in the coffee field. Such things, such description of the Haitian power was being spread abroad in the community. So, still a boy, very curious and sensitive to any kind of information dealing with spiritual matters. Yet I was far away from any kind of conversation pertaining to the ancient Maccabees, the Maccabeans, and their revolt in ancient Yasha'Allah, in ancient Israel, and the connection of Haitians, the Haitians of modern 1960s in the Western world, and there in Abaco, you know, I didn't have the understanding of a connection to the separate histories that was being brought together with the coming of the Haitians to Abaco, or to the area where I lived, in Lake City it was called. And so, no doubt, as I understand it now, that the Haitian Levitical priest question was a scary and growing concern for Abaconians in general. And of course, you know, news spread. And I guess I don't need to say more on that part of it. But then, you know, the Haitian Revolution had already happened. And there we were at that time in the early 60s, and moving on in time with the presence of the Haitians and the dread of them, that they had such voodoo powers to affect ill health and well-being in every way. This is what was spread around about them, that they were a serious kind of people. And so there it was in the community. As the Bahamas political scene shifted from UBP, that was called the United Bahamian Party, a party of white faces. As the scene shifted from them, the white faces, the UBP, to the black faces of P.L.P. politics in the mid to upper 1960s, there was a minister of the P.L.P. government, a Mr. Aloftus Roker. I hope I got his name right. I believe I do have it, even though it's been a long time since I, you know, I've tried to interact with the knowledge, the information about him. But it has occurred to me now, as I am in this series of word that has shown up the Haitians as the people of the ancient Maccabees, Maccabeus. And so Mr. Roker, as I was mentioning, Aloftus Roker, he was like a lone wolf out on a desert hill, giving the agonizing call for attention to the looming Haitian infiltration into the Bahamas and Bahamian society. And this agonizing call, as I term it, could be heard in the sound bites of his offerings in the newscasts on ZNS Radio, the main and the original radio station in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. But I listened with rapt intention every time I heard Mr. Aloftus Roker giving his input on that Haitian question with alarm and foreboding. And it had my interest, only as I suppose being a younger one at that time, getting near to, going nearer to the teen years, I didn't have the information and the knowledge to bridge what he was offering with concrete evidence, if you will, on my part, to give it the credence that I would need to give it. But it certainly came out in his voice deflections or inflections. Mr. Aloftus Roker, he was very concerned about the Haitian influx into the Bahamas. When I heard him speaking on the radio about his concern with Haitian problems from a young preteen to my teenage years, I felt chills going through my body. I felt also an earnest, unspoken concern breaking through his commentary. You know how the news go and how information go when you're giving it. In some cases, you got to use some caution with what you're offering and saying, no matter how good it is. You get the drift. So Mr. Roker, a man at the time, I don't know exactly what his age was, but obviously an astute human being and a political individual then, an individual he was, and being in the halls of government, he used that kind of sense about it in making his declarations. But for me as a young boy, I understood that he had some serious concern. I only couldn't put it together for myself until now. So all I could do was feel the passion of his concern and a despairing cry for further attention to the issue of the Haitian influx. I wanted to know really the depth for his agony about the Haitian infiltration to the Bahamas. Now, today, it is quite an open issue. As I have been offering to you from this platform, what now has blossomed into the connection of our present, the Levites, the Haitians, their connection with the ancient Maccabeans, blood family, with priests of the Bible, of the scriptures. And so with the concern of what's his name? Not John, Simon Maccabeus. He was at least one or another one of those Maccabeans who were arrested, I suppose, with the declaration of Psalm 110 that speaks of the Mashiach coming in the order of Melchizedek. And he attempted to assert himself to kingship, to have a combination of a priest king. He already was working on it back then. And so it is evident that the present-day Levites, Haitians, who inherited, you know, the the sentiments and the mindset of their forefathers, it is evident now that they share that mindset and were put or allowed themselves to be put into the the thinking or the setting up of a conscious revolution against the idea of the coming Messiah as he is pronounced in the scripture. And as it became evident in the history following Maccabeus and his clan, and then you had the actual birth of the Messiah in his time, in the days of Herod, the Edomite, in the times of Pilate. You had the Mashiach born in the cradle of the 12 tribes. And Yasha'Allah. By now, the 12 tribes were in disarray because they would not settle themselves to hear, to listen and obey the directions of the Most High wholeheartedly, as did our forefathers, Abraham and, his sons right after him. Abba Yah loved our forefathers because they obeyed him. They listened to what he had to say. And if they didn't understand, they asked for directions. This is what you do, Yasha'Allah. If you don't understand, you ask for direction. You say, yes, Father, I hear what you say. How could I accomplish it? How could I do what you want me to do? And let him show you by his Ruach. But we didn't do that. We went aside and followed Esau, the devil. That's what we did. And followed other nations, in disobedience to the Most High, our power. And now the Mashiach, as he comes, and he moves in the style of the Lamb of Al-Hayim, the Lamb of Yah, to take away the sin of the world. Yes, Esau comes down with the ultimate vehemence against him. The one to take away the sin of the world. Esau disavows him. Don't want him to, set foot on the premises in the land of Yasha'Allah. So Herod and Pilate and Herod did their thing for Rome and mutilated him, I guess you could say. You look in the book of Isaiah and see how they treat the suffering servant of Yahweh. How they mashed him up in the halls of Pilate. But our forefathers, the ones that came along in the process of time and were the keepers of the gate, Sanhedrin and, whoever else were a part of the power structure. Maccabees, remember? They all cried out. They thought they were doing something good for themselves. They cried out in the book of Matthias, chapters 26 and 27. They cried out, crucify him. No, Pilate says, but this is your king. We have no king but Caesar. This is what Yasha'Allah said. And you know them, them fallen Maccabean priests. Can you imagine them in the midst? Imagine them, brethren, in relation to what you understand of them today as the Haitians. Imagine them. You know, they were rooting for his crucifixion. I have to see it that way. That's the only way I can see it now. Rooting for his crucifixion. Yeah, crucify. Shall I crucify your king? You hear Pilate pretending to be caring for the matter? Uh-huh. Washing his hands as his wife tells him, you better leave that man alone. But Pilate says, pardon the expression, I'm the nigger in command here. And Pilate give the go-ahead for the crucifixion. And yeah, I mean, you could imagine the Mashiach anyhow. You know, he told his followers, I got a baptism to be baptized with. And I wish it was done already, but, you know, let everything take its course. He was in a race, on a mission to accomplish being the sacrificial lamb for the sin of the world. Here was Esau. You remember Esau, the blocker, the stopper, the invader against the work of the Most High to bring salvation to the world. First to the cradle, Yasha'Allah, 12 tribes. And whosoever else was willing to come, be a part of that heritage of the saved. But there was Esau, blocking, threatening, plotting against, doing everything he can to stop it, to stop the process of having citizens of the world saved through the sacrifice of our Mashiach in the 12 tribes, in Yasha'Allah. So, back to the future and our brother, our elder. Again, I don't know if he's still alive at the moment. I tried to get some information, but I was unable to verify. But, and in case I think his family would appreciate the fact that if only myself, as one individual and as a part of the diaspora, from what I learned about him, what was the intent of his message concerning the influx of the Haitian migration to the Bahamas, I understand. And I'm sitting now, but in my heart, I stand to applaud him and give thanks for his stance, his willingness to stem the tide of abuse and desecration that Levi brought with him. You remember one of their chief concern was with voodoo, zombification, and having individuals brought over to work in the coffee fields and such things, such matters that they were concerned with. For they were the other half of the enslavement machinery. And they were taking people, especially Yasha'Allah, under the color of their victory in the revolution. This is what they were coming with, that they got a victory over the French. And they were sucking in members of the diaspora of the Hebrew lights here in the Bahamas. And I guess all over the diaspora. I'm putting that in there. As I saw that was a part of their mission, how far they went with it. Well, I guess it's a given now, and it's all over. But at that time, you know, they were giving it out to the public, or the Bahamian public, I'll say, or the fallen Yasharalite, the Yisraelite community, that they gained this superb victory over the French. And when it came to me, in my time, I looked over the matter with a, little cross eye, because I got the sense of something being wrong with it. When I got the idea of this input concerning voodoo, and these occult features as being a part of their movement and their path to victory. So in my autobiography, Rising to the Final Battle, I make mention of them, of the Haitian Revolution. In some case, in glowing terms, I did, because I felt appreciated of them exerting themselves, and manning up, gaining this victory. But in the back of my mind, the accusations of the devil, like a Pat Buchanan and others who were bad mouthing the Haitians for their strength or their intent to actually fight against the French and all those others. It was something I think was uncharacteristic of the type of comment that I felt should have been. All the while, though, it was in the back of my mind, this thing, and the way they were reported to have gotten this victory seemed to put a damper on my intent to, give this high praise for them. And so I had a reserve, even as I did the documentary, Rising to the Final Battle. And now it has come to me fully, the understanding of what it went on, that Levi, the Haitians, going back to the Maccabeans and their quest, the Maccabean quest to raise up a priest king in essence became a matter of disdain with them, that there was this king, this Malach coming in the order of Melchizedek, who was to even be the savior of mankind, the king of Yasharallah, and they themselves were in opposition to this. So Esau had company, and therefore they made the pact and the revolution. You see? And now, I say then, and a belated concession unto the beloved, I have to say, I believe that's the case, the beloved minister, Aloftus Roker, former P.L.P. Minister of some kind. Couldn't get the full report on it. An elder to me, Aloftus Roker, his commentary on the Haitian, whom we now know as the children of the Maccabees, the Levitical priests concerned, were well-founded and turned out to be, as he fearfully expressed it then. And I also think that the far reaches of the problem, we as a Bahamian settlement, the Bahamas, as the world-renowned gateway to the slave world, have been sacked with the confirmation to our elder and statesman, I would call him, Minister Aloftus Roker, his fears, and then some. His fears were well-founded. And we thank the Father for his willingness to stand in his day or in his time, as he did. For it was an encouragement to me. It gave me the impetus to continue to search for the reason why he was so concerned with the Haitian question. So I say hats off to the elder Minister Aloftus Roker for an unmistakable show of courage and tough strength in a time of political need at the gateway to the new world. So I pray, Yasha Allah, all over, all those in the diaspora, people of the world, that you now understand and recognize a Bahamian icon, our former minister, Aloftus Roker, a hero of Bahamian politics and nationality, even if I have to say so, yes. And the Most High bless Yasha Allah, continue to strengthen you, to grow in His grace and in the knowledge of the Savior of the world, Hamashiach, our Malak, in the mighty Ruach. So let it be. Finish it, Kamisha. Finish it. I'm shutting it down. I'm shutting it down now. Oh, we